Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Resident Founder Podcast. I'm your host, Daniella, an emergency medicine resident physician, taking you behind the scenes as I build a tech startup called PayScope MD, which allows physicians to get AI insights on their employment contracts in addition to real-time salary benchmarking. Speaking of which, today's sponsor is PayScope MD. Try our beta version of the product today at www.getpayscope.com. Link will be down below in the description. And I'm excited to introduce our guest for today. We have Dr. Christina Henderson, who's an anesthesiology resident over at the University of Wisconsin, who from her experience being a fourth-year medical student doing away rotations, created her platform and business called Reliable Residency, which allow medical students, traveling nurses, and physicians and other healthcare professionals find affordable short-term housing. Dr. Henderson, thank you so much for being part of the Resident Founder Podcast. Christina, so the first question I have for you is tell me a little bit about Reliable Residence and what was the story behind you kind of creating this platform.
Yeah, so Reliable Residence was built from a personal experience of mine as a medical student back in 2022. I was rotating across the country. I scored a rotation out on the East Coast, which I was really excited about. And then soon after, found out I had to find my own housing. I looked on Airbnb and VRBO and pretty much every resource you could think of. And actually, the only place I could find something was on Craigslist, believe it or not.
Mm.
Yeah, so I rented a room off Craigslist. And when I did a FaceTime tour with the homeowner prior to that, it looked pretty good. It looked like reasonable for what the price was. But when I showed up, I had learned that there were parts of the house that were left out of that FaceTime tour. And then I think a week or two into my stay, I woke up to a cockroach crawling across my bed. So that definitely scarred me for a little bit in terms of finding housing for rotations. Fast forward a year later, I overheard a couple medical students talking in my residency program about how hard it was for them to find housing in an entirely different location in the country. And so that's really what sparked Reliable Residence, which is really an all in one solution for healthcare professionals to find furnished monthly housing.
No, absolutely. And for the listeners, I'll kind of break down a little bit about away rotation, especially if like there's any like younger med students. But essentially, in your fourth year of medical school, you're applying into the specialty of your choice, and you have the opportunity to do something called as away rotation, or sometimes you might hear it called sub-internship, other words. But essentially, you have the opportunity to rotate at a different institution, and be able to kind of like almost do like a trial interview for between 2 to 4 weeks, to where you're really trying to get your foot in the door at these programs, and also just trying to figure out if you like this particular institution or do you like this region of the particular area. But as you can imagine, especially if you're going to be going out of state, you're going to be responsible for housing, which is what Christina is mentioning, in addition to a lot of other stuff, like whether it's your rental car, food, gas, a lot of different expenses. So it can get really costly. So I totally agree. I did away rotations myself. I'm originally from Connecticut, so I did all my away rotations outside of Connecticut. And I vividly remember being in Colorado when I did one of my away rotations, and it was so difficult to find housing. Luckily, I found a resident who was renting out their basement of their house that was already fully furnished, so that really worked out. But I agree, like it can be very difficult to find like a really good housing, but also in addition, affordable housing. That's also another like difficult part. So my other question to you is like, why do you think it's like so hard for medical students or just like healthcare professionals to kind of find these places? Like, why is it so difficult in this market?
Yeah, it's really difficult because it's such a gray zone. So it's not short term like Airbnb or weekend stays, and it's not long term leases through Zillow. And so finding a website or a resource that even caters to that gray zone can be really challenging. And then when you finally do find that website, like there's a couple others out there, sorting through like what is a high quality unit, making sure you're filtering out for scams. And then another barrier students often face is not hearing back from that homeowner. So it can be pretty frustrating when you're, busy working 12-hour shifts at a hospital and you're trying to tee up your next rotation and the homeowner for that place isn't getting back to you. And so you just really feel like you're grasping at straws. So this solution we built out is a much more streamlined way of only 30 plus day housing that not only serves the gray zone, but the homeowners know that there really is an expectation to respond and to jump on these requests as soon as possible so that we're de-stressing the entire process for medical students.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned that, it's not just medical students too. You're doing other healthcare professionals. I know you mentioned like travel nurses and so forth. Tell me about the idea of expanding there, because obviously your motivation came from you as a medical student. So I'm more curious in terms of when did the thought came into mind of like adding in other healthcare professionals as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thought came in. I had always known that travel nurses were a big part of the market, but locum physicians or traveling
Mhm.
physicians were less known to me until I had spotted them across the hospital. I had seen job postings online, various other avenues of realizing that traveling physicians also need help with housing. From there, it really just started to grow, and I learned more that respiratory therapists and even dental hygienists and CNAs, really everything in between. If there's a gap anywhere in the hospital, that hospital fills the gap with a temporary worker in that department. And so, really realizing that all of those temporary workers can't find housing. And if they can't find housing, they're not coming to serve the local community. And the cycle continues.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And it's a good point too, because you mentioned like there's a lot of other healthcare professionals who are like struggling with this as well. And can also just be similarly like frustrating, just like how we mentioned as a medical student. So you have this bad experience in your fourth year. Now you start to kind of think about this idea, like how exactly did you kind of get started of kind of taking this idea and kind of building out this platform?
I will say, in all transparency, it's hard. It was really hard at first. I have no background in entrepreneurship. I don't
Mhm.
have an MBA. No one in my family has started a tech company. And so it was a little daunting. And I actually leaned pretty heavily on educational resources like podcasts,
Mhm.
funny enough, and online research to figure out how did Airbnb get started? How did these other, big housing platforms start from the bottom up? So it was really my co-founder and I, who's also my husband, just started chipping away slowly at how do we build a website? And when we fixed that step, then we would, how do we get
Yeah.
supply? And so we got homeowners by going out and hand matching leads that will come in from med students or travel nurses to these homeowners through an Excel document. So it
Mhm.
really started in Excel, and then it slowly built up into what is now a platform, and we're launching in different cities, and so it's really cool to see where it started versus where it is now, and how it's helping even more and more people as we grow.
No, that's absolutely amazing. And a little bit about the process with you. Are you buying properties yourself or relying more on other people listing or maybe a mixture of both?
We do not buy properties, although I personally own a rental unit. We
Mhm.
actually partner with private homeowners and apartment
Mhm.
complexes that list and manage their own units on our platform. So we also do not operate as a sublet model. We really want the homeowner to own their own rental because we believe they have more skin in the game and therefore they're higher quality rentals because of it.
Gotcha. Makes complete sense there. Now, with these individuals that you're kind of contracting with, are there certain like criteria they have to meet for them to be kind of like partner with you, especially with them kind of be more focused and going to be renting to like healthcare professionals?
There are 3 big criteria they have to meet with us. The first one is it has to be fully furnished, and we mean pretty turnkey by that. So linens, towels. We don't want a medical student or a nurse to have to go out and buy a vacuum or anything of that nature. The second thing is it has to include utilities and Wi-Fi and rent. That's really important to us because we don't want added fees. You think you're getting one price and then you realize it's actually $500 more a month. That can be pretty stressful. And the third and most unique to our platform is we do a walkthrough of every unit
Mhm.
before we list it on the website, which is very rare. We do this because, like I said, I was catfished. Catfishing
Mhm.
happens all the time, even on really big platforms. And when you are traveling across the country to a city or hospital you've never been to, the last thing you need is to be catfished in the rental you just booked. And so we totally abate that issue altogether by doing a walkthrough before it's even live on our platform.
That's absolutely amazing. And especially to even find the time to do all these walkthroughs. I know it's very time consuming, but I do like how you're saying like you're trying to meet a standard so that as people, as you mentioned, like people don't get catfished, they know what they're getting themselves into, and it adds like some credibility of like what are you actually signing for, which I think it's very important for all healthcare professionals to be aware of like where they're actually going to be living. So I think that's very commendable.
Yeah.
As
Thank you.
mentioned before in the introduction, you're obviously a busy resident within the field of anesthesia, so I feel like a common question is like, how exactly do you find the time to kind of balance the two between residency, being a business owner, and everything in between?
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, it's challenging to balance business with medicine, but we have different passions in life. And so it's important to be able to meet all those passions. And so I am able to balance this not only through help with my team. So my co founder does a lot of work on the business end. We also have a full time website developer that continues to maintain and improve our website. And then we lean on other resources. So I do spend a lot of weekends and after hour time working on the company, helping to grow it and make it flourish. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to what's important, and if it's important to you, you make time. And both of these things are incredibly important to me, so I find a way.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Like you mentioned, it's like finding like those boundaries for sure of like, okay, when you're at work, you're going to be focusing at work. When you have time to yourself, you're going to be focusing on what are the priorities that you have for yourself. And in your case, obviously, you just mentioned that you have a husband, you have this business. There's so many other great things that you want to focus on. So focus on those priorities. I think it's very important for a lot of listeners, particularly people who are in residency or any type of busy type of schedule to kind of like be mindful of. I think similar on those lines, have you ever received any like backlash or criticism of you being a doctor while also kind of running a business in terms of like, "Oh, you can't be a doctor and this."
Yeah, it's a great question too. So I'd say overarching positive feedback about being in medicine, running a company, knowing the pain point and trying to solve it from that pain point. However, as we all know, negative criticism follows you kind of wherever you go. And so I have had some negative criticism related to how do I balance my time? How am I making all of this work? And I would just say with that to anyone listening that you're going to get that in any job you're in, any startup you do, any, side hustle you're working on. But it's really important to focus on what's important to you and to make sure that you're appropriately spending your time where it's needed. So as you said, when I'm at the hospital, I am fully invested in patient care. That's where my mind is. But when I'm not at the hospital, I spend my time focusing on helping medical students find housing so that they can go help patients. So at the end of the day, as long as you are following, what you believe is right for you and being professional and appropriate in those settings, don't listen to the negative criticism because people will back you. They'll support you.
Absolutely, I couldn't say it better. I think also too, when starting out with this, was there anything that kind of surprised you, on this entrepreneurship journey that you didn't really think much about or know much about before starting?
I would say fundraising was like a black cloud to me of the unknown,
Mm,
and pretty scary. Just the whole thought process of asking strangers for money, not knowing that the company's ever going to be successful. We
mhm.
did fundraise our first pre-seed round in October, and it went a lot better than I anticipated. We were able to grow some great connections from it. I was able to learn a lot about fundraising and all the metrics that go into it. So I found that to be pretty surprising overall and a much needed step of a startup that's trying to scale across the country.
Mm. And when it comes to the funding area, especially when thinking about funding in terms of getting VC funding or even just raising money, did you kind of have any good connections to kind of hopefully direct you into the right process or even learning how to do like pitch decks or anything? Or did you kind of learn on your own from like all the stuff you were talking a little bit about before?
Yeah, I definitely have mentors that guided me along the way. I have a really strong mentor who's also helped a lot with the investment side of things. So I owe that to him, certainly. And I would say leaning on those not only in your network, so, starting with someone who's just a friend, and then you slowly grow your network, build it up. And all of a sudden, you're sitting in front of a highly known VC or angel investor, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I built up this stare to them through networking.
No, absolutely. I think that's amazing. And, for the people listening as well too, when it comes to fundraising, there's like different stages that you go through. The way that I kind of think about is like rounds. Like I almost think of like almost like a playoff tournament in a sense, where like you
Right.
kind of progress with each round. There's like pre-seed, there's, seed, series A, series B. And so you kind of progress through the rounds as you need more money. And so those are some of the terminology just for some of the listeners who are just tuning in and might be a little bit confused with some of the terminology there. But I think that's absolutely amazing and obviously really good growth for the product and the business as well. But I think similar to you, then you kind of mentioned a little bit earlier too of like you've expanded to different cities. But what are some of like the long term goals or like your bigger vision and kind of seeing what reliable residence?
Our big vision is to take this nationwide because, in
Mm,
my mind, in order to help medical students like myself, years and years ago, they're bouncing from city to city across the country. And we want to be able to support them the entire way. And we cannot do that unless we are in every city throughout the country. So that is our long term vision. So far, it's looking like that will be achievable. We have quite a wait list of homeowners across the country. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And at the end of the day, we really want to be the go to high quality platform for healthcare professionals.
that's absolutely amazing and definitely will reach a lot of people. I'm curious in terms of like how do you think that might look in terms of because as you mentioned, you want to do a walkthrough of all these properties. So do you think you might hire people to do the walkthroughs for you? Do you still want to still be involved directly in terms of doing the walkthroughs?
That's a great question, and we are looking at hiring, and we have hired already people in outside cities to do walkthroughs for us. We lean on certain types of people that we know are reputable to do those walkthroughs so that we can ensure there's no compromising again in the quality of the unit. But I am definitely shy to give that up because
Mhm.
again, I believe the walkthrough is such a critical piece of the onboarding process for homeowners.
No, absolutely. That totally makes sense as well. But I do like the vision because I totally agree. I think there's so many medical students, healthcare workers just across the country who are working at all these hospitals that are always constantly looking for housing. I feel like that's always a conversation they even have at work of like, oh, are you thinking about moving? Where are you going? Like, it's always just like a random topic of conversation. So I think it's definitely like very valuable in that particular set. I think also too, in terms of reliable residents and kind of a little bit of what you're building here I think also too, do you kind of contract or like maybe have conversations with like the hospitals themselves in terms of collaborations or like is it more like you're just kind of doing more stuff independently there?
Yeah, so we work a lot with not only independent homeowners and travel nurses and med students. We do go to the hospital too. We try and really build up a relationship with them so that travel nurses and doctors that funnel in through the system are given us as a potential resource. Most hospitals do not endorse a single platform,
Mhm.
which I think is totally appropriate so that everybody has a choice, obviously, in the matter. But we want to be at the top of that resource list as one of the only healthcare 30 plus day housing resources that does walkthroughs. So as we expand, we do try and talk to every hospital within that city.
No, that's great. I think what some of your advice you would give to young trainees, medical students who are really looking to kind of get into the real estate game, whether it is for like short-term rentals or et cetera, that you think might be helpful for them.
I would say start early, a lot earlier than you think. You're a medical student. And I remember thinking, when I get to residency, I'll think about it. And then
Mhm.
starting residency, well, maybe when I'm an attending, I'll have the capital or whatever resources to get into it. But actually, I think you should think about it reverse engineering. Where do you want to be when you're an attending? And then walk it back. How can you make that happen? Real estate is such a wonderful way to invest and have a side hustle, depending on the way you do it. So, you don't need everything you think you might need to get started in that area. In terms of starting a business, I would say the same thing goes. If you recognize a problem in the market, and especially if it's in healthcare, you know it through and through, why not you to be the one to tackle that problem? A
Mhm.
lot of us doubt ourselves and again think we don't have an MBA and we don't have family who started a company. It doesn't matter. A lot of the biggest companies out in the country right now started with just an idea. So if I can do it, you can certainly do it.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's a really good segue because my other question for you was going to be, do you think medical students and other young trainees, particularly those who are in residence, should be kind of looking into entrepreneurship if they're interested in it? And if so, like, why do you think that like young trainees and so forth can become like really good entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. You are never more observant to your surroundings and what's going on than you are when you first start and are learning the system. And that is when you recognize the flaws in the system. And if you act on those flaws by researching, and even if it hits a dead end, really putting your mind to something and pivoting is going to be the way to go if you're interested in entrepreneurship. You have a lot more allies in your corner too, I would say, than you think you do. I'm sure you can find an attending, a co-resident, someone as a mentor within the hospital network to help you get started. I know that I leaned on some of my mentors outside of the hospital as well, certainly to help me and guide me early on before I released this to the public.
No, I totally agree. I always say this, like I feel like there is a lot of parallels between medicine and entrepreneurship, but it's just masked very differently. I always say like business is really just a different language, just like how in medicine we speak in our own medical jargon and say a lot of terminology to make sense to us. Business is the same thing of learning the language, and honestly, within it, there's a lot of overlap because especially as medical students, as residents, like you're managing so many different things. You're managing people, time, and so you actually realize like you do have a lot of entrepreneurial tendencies. The idea is just hopefully just bridging in a problem that you can see, which I think as healthcare professionals, we witness on a daily basis, on a day to day. Like for you, it was an away rotation. For other people, it's just like working directly into the hospital and seeing what something is wrong. And so if you can kind of bridge that gap of like, okay, I see something that's a problem and I can use and leverage a little bit the skills that I kind of already have. And then that's really what kind of turns into a business right then and there. So I think that's 100% agree.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up such a good point. I mean, I know medical school, we're lacking some of the financial education, but if you can do some of that yourself and again, find mentors in that area, you've pretty much clicked in the last piece that you need to be an entrepreneur. And so, yeah, there's tons of parallels. It's a great segue to get into business and other things.
Yeah, like for example, when I first learned about like what a pitch deck is, like if you like Google like pitch deck, like there's like 50 million videos on YouTube. If I go on TikTok, there's so many things about people like trying to make a pitch deck. And then I realized I was like, that's pretty much like an oral presentation that we kind of do like as medical students or even residents. I was like, wait, like it's pretty similar of just like kind of compiling your slides of like, what are you doing? What was your methodology? What's your results? What's your future direction? I was like, this is similar to like how we would conduct research, but once again, frameworked it in a different terminology and way that once again, this is why I'm saying like the jargon is just a little bit different, but it's a lot of different similar parallels. So I totally agree there as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a great point. I'll never forget to giving like one of my biggest presentation, my pitch decks, to a fundraising team and hearing someone comment saying, don't take this the wrong way, but, and all I could think in my head is, I work in healthcare. You don't need to.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, we're all a lot more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. Definitely, working in healthcare.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess also too is, some of the hesitancy for a lot of individuals who are particularly physicians who want to become entrepreneurs is maybe because they are like, I don't come from a business background. As you mentioned in the beginning, like you said, you didn't have an MBA, you didn't have any business degrees or any backgrounds. So what would you say to those people who are hesitant of like, I have this idea, I want to do something, but I just don't feel as though I have the knowledge there?
I would say go out and find the knowledge. That could be through people, it could be through resources, podcasts, anything you can get your hands on to start, absorbing that information. How did y'all use Airbnb as a story? The founder of Airbnb had never started a company, certainly not to that extent, and certainly learned on the fly. And some of the biggest companies out there, that's exactly how they got started too, with an idea and just learning along the way. So I would really lean into those resources. You can establish a business plan, but do not spend a ton of time on it. You really just want to start building and testing it out in the community to see if it's something that people are actually interested in.
Absolutely. I agree. I think the biggest thing too is starting with what you have around you. So, if you have YouTube, just go on YouTube and start there in terms of learning about stuff. Like I said, I'm a big person on TikTok, so I love like watching TikTok videos. And honestly, in the entrepreneur space, there's a lot of good free advice that is very, very helpful and practical if you're starting a business. Go to your local library if you want to pick up in books and read, podcasts. So there is a lot of really good opportunities for you to kind of start with what you have and kind of build on important. And then most important, like what you mentioned as well too, is focusing on the mentorship piece. There's always going to be somebody out there willing to mentor you, help you, or even just push you in the right direction. So I think that's another thing that I think it's also important as well.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And like you said, the parallels of medicine, imposter syndrome is another thing that also carries over both in medicine
Hmm.
and entrepreneurship. You will have this imposter syndrome. The first time you go to pitch your startup idea, you feel like an imposter. But at the end of the day, you're gonna get so in the weeds of it. You'll know so much more than the general public will about that topic that you really will be the go-to point of contact in that market, in that specialty or whatever it is you land on.
Absolutely. And I'm curious too, in the beginning stages of Reliable Residence, how are you able to kind of build a little bit of some trust and some credibility to kind of get property owners to kind of like trust you and be part of your platform?
We really worked hard in the beginning to earn our five-star reviews, to earn that trust signal, and we did that by hand matching. We did it by checking in on travelers and seeing how their stay was going, and if they didn't love it, we moved them to another property.
Mm.
And we really went above and beyond to make sure that people were having a good experience. We still do that to this day. We still get together with our travelers, try and grab a beer or coffee, what have you, to catch up with them and meet them in person. And we also still send gifts to travelers as a welcome to Mapson.
Absolutely. That's great. I know you touched on this a little bit already in terms of like your, long-term goals, but any goals kind of coming up with the new year now of 2026 that you kind of have for the business that you really want to have?
Yes, goals for 2026 would be expanding across multiple states. It would be coming out with our new website, which we're very excited about. That will be more streamlined and really exciting to use. And then lastly, I would say we would love just for the community to start hearing about us across the
Mhm.
country, getting more engaged in things just like this and educating those around us, particularly in healthcare, about not only housing, but entrepreneurship in general and how to get involved.
That's absolutely amazing. Christina, as we get ready to wrap up the show, where can people find you? And most importantly, where can people find more information about Reliable Residence if they're interested?
You can find us at our website is www.reliableresidence.com, where you can list or book properties. We're also on Instagram as reliable_residence and TikTok, which I put out a daily educational video at Reliable Residence as well.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure to have all the links posted down below so that people can come find you. Thank you so much again for Christina for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me on the Resident Founder podcast. It was a pleasure for all the listeners. I hope you were able to have some good takeaways. And until next time, let me just
Thank you
stop
so
the
much.
recording.